It's the morning of October 2nd, 1999. The kind of morning that tricks you into thinking nothing bad could ever happen. The sky over Colorado was bright, the air crisp, and the mountains seemed alive with autumn color, reds and golds brushing against the endless green of pine. It was the sort of day that begged for adventure, for laughter, for exploring. And in the middle of it all was a little boy, just 3 years old, named Jared Atadero. Now, Jared wasn't your typical shy toddler. He was full of energy, curious, and always the one to run ahead with a fearless grin. That morning, he was supposed to be on a short trip with a church group, something simple, something safe, a visit to a fish hatchery. His dad, Alan, had no reason to worry when he said goodbye. But plans have a way of changing, don't they? And sometimes those changes set off a chain of events no one could ever undo. Instead of the hatchery, the group decided to hike. Big South Trail, tucked deep into the rugged beauty of the Rockies, isn't a place you'd expect to take children. The path winds, climbs, narrows, and disappears into thick forest. But there they went, a handful of adults and kids, making their way along the trail. And Jared, oh, he was thrilled. He darted forward, running just ahead, his laughter bouncing off the trees. Nobody thought much of it at first. He was just a boy, chasing adventure. And then, silence. Just like that. One moment, a child's voice, the sound of sneakers hitting dirt, and the next, nothing. Jared was gone, vanished into the wild. No scream, no cry for help, no warning. The adults panicked. They searched the trail, calling his name, their voices echoing into the canyon. Hours stretched into a nightmare. When authorities arrived, helicopters scanned from above, search dogs swept the ground, and volunteers scoured every hidden corner. But the forest, vast and unforgiving, gave back nothing. What followed was confusion, heartbreak, and questions that never found answers. How could a 3-year-old disappear in broad daylight? Did he slip, fall, get lost? Was it nature itself, or something darker? Even when evidence appeared years later, bits of clothing, tiny shoes, the mystery only grew deeper. This story isn't just about a boy who went missing. It's about a father's torment, a community shaken, and a haunting that still lingers in the Colorado mountains. It's about how quickly joy can turn to dread. 1 minute, a child's laughter fills the air, and the next, an entire forest swallows it whole. And so we begin, the mystery of Jared Atadero. Jared Atadero was born on January 24th, 1996, in Colorado. From the very beginning, he was described as bright-eyed, curious, and impossibly full of life. He had that spark, the kind of energy that made people smile even when they were having the worst of days. He was the youngest child in his family, and with that came a kind of charm, a natural ability to draw attention, and, at times, to get away with things his older siblings never could. His father, Alan, had always wanted his children to experience the beauty of the outdoors. For him, Colorado's mountains weren't just scenery, they were home, and he hoped to pass that love of wild places down to his kids. Jared grew up surrounded by those towering peaks, the rushing rivers, and the smell of pine that lingered in the air. He was learning, step by step, how to be part of that world, and he took to it with eagerness. Family meant everything to Jared. He was especially close to his twin sister, Jocelyn. The two of them were inseparable, almost like mirror images. When one laughed, the other laughed too. When one cried, the other cried harder. People often said they had their own little language, finishing each other's sentences and creating games that only they understood. If Jared was running off to climb something he probably shouldn't, chances were good that Jocelyn was right behind him. Stories from those early years painted him as adventurous and fearless. At just 3 years old, he already had a habit of pushing boundaries. If a fence stood in his way, he'd find a way over it. If a creek ran across his path, he'd splash straight through, not caring about wet shoes or muddy clothes. His family joked that he had no fear in his bones. But behind that bold streak was also a child who adored hugs, bedtime stories, and the simple comfort of holding someone's hand. The Atadero family had their share of challenges, like any family. Alan was a single father, raising his children while managing the pressures of daily life. That wasn't always easy, but he made it work. He wanted his kids to grow up strong, to be kind, and to experience life as fully as possible. And in those years before tragedy struck, life felt hopeful. Jared's laughter filled their small world, and every day seemed like the beginning of something bigger. Even at such a young age, Jared's personality left an imprint on everyone he met. Neighbors remembered him darting around with boundless energy. Family friends described him as the little boy who never stopped asking questions. Why is the sky blue? Why do trees grow so tall? Why can't I climb higher? His sense of wonder was endless, and it made people believe he had a bright future ahead. And maybe that's what makes his story so deeply heartbreaking. Because when you picture this little boy growing up with the mountains as his playground, laughing with his twin sister, and holding tight to his father's hand, it becomes impossible not to imagine what he might have grown into. His early life was short, painfully short, but it was filled with love, adventure, and the promise of everything yet to come. October 2nd, 1999, was supposed to be simple. That morning, Alan Adedero, Jared's dad, agreed to let a group from his church, the Christian Singles Network, take his children on a short outing. They had promised it would be nothing complicated, just a trip to a nearby fish hatchery. Alan trusted them. He wanted his kids to enjoy the fresh air, to have fun, and honestly, to give them a break from the usual routine. He couldn't have imagined how quickly everything would spiral. The group set out, cars winding up into the Rockies, the crisp mountain air pouring in through rolled-down windows. The children were excited, chattering in the back seats. But when they reached the hatchery, plans shifted. Instead of staying there, some of the adults suggested a hike along Big South Trail, tucked deep into Roosevelt National Forest. For many, it sounded like an adventure. But it was a trail far more dangerous than anyone realized, especially for children so young. The hike began innocently enough. Kids ran ahead. Adults followed in loose clusters, the air filled with laughter and the crunch of boots on dirt. Jared, true to his fearless nature, raced forward, darting between trees, his little shoes pounding the earth. Witnesses later recalled how he seemed unstoppable, brimming with energy, as if the forest itself was his playground. But then came that moment, the one where everything changed. Somewhere along the trail, Jared disappeared. He wasn't far at first. Adults said they could still hear him, his voice echoing through the woods. But as the group moved, his sounds grew faint, then vanished completely. Just like that. One instant he was there, full of life, and the next gone. Panic set in. The adults scrambled, calling his name, scanning between trees, their voices bouncing off canyon walls. Some ran ahead, others doubled back. But there was no trace. No cry, no sound of stumbling. No answer to their desperate shouts. The cheerful outing had turned into a nightmare. When word reached Alan, he was consumed by dread. His son was missing in one of the most unforgiving landscapes imaginable. As searchers rushed in, helicopters circled overhead, dogs swept the trails, and dozens of volunteers lined the forest floor. Yet for all the effort, the mountain remained silent. Jared was nowhere to be found. In the days that followed, the atmosphere grew heavier. Rumors spread, theories sprouted. Some believed he had wandered too far, lost among the trees. Others whispered about wild animals, mountain lions lurking in the shadows. And yet, no clear evidence surfaced. It was as though the earth itself had swallowed him whole. For his family, the change was unbearable. Alan replayed every detail in his mind, over and over. Had he made the wrong choice that morning? Could he have prevented it? Nights became endless, filled with hope one moment and crushing despair the next. Jared's twin sister, Jocelyn, struggled too. She couldn't understand why her brother wasn't coming home, why his bed stayed empty, why the house felt so painfully quiet. The community around them was equally shaken. Some of the church members who had been on that hike carried deep guilt. Others defended themselves, insisting they had done everything they could. But beneath the surface lingered a question too heavy to ignore. Was this simply a tragic accident, or had something more sinister taken place? Clues trickled in, but revealed nothing certain. A possible sighting here, a strange noise reported there, but nothing solid enough to close the gap between hope and heartbreak. The line between real danger and imagined fear blurred. And in that haze of grief and confusion, the mystery of Jared's disappearance took root, a wound that would never fully heal, a question that would haunt every step of the investigation to come. In the days after Jared vanished, search crews worked tirelessly, combing through the rugged terrain of Roosevelt National Forest. Helicopters thumped overhead, search dogs barked as they caught faint scents, and volunteers trudged up and down steep, rocky trails. For a while, there was still hope. People whispered that maybe he had wandered off and found shelter. Maybe, against the odds, they'd discover him tired but safe, hiding under a tree or near the river. That hope kept the Atadero family going. Alan stood at the center of it all, refusing to believe his son could simply vanish without a trace. He poured himself into the search, pushing through exhaustion, clinging to the belief that the next call on the radio, the next sound in the distance, would bring his boy back. For him, there was no other choice but to keep moving forward, to keep believing. And there were moments that almost felt like breakthroughs. A report of footprints, a dog barking louder in one area. Someone thought they heard movement in the trees. Each time, the surge of adrenaline shot through everyone. This could be it. This could be Jared. But just as quickly, those hopes crumbled into silence. False leads piled up, and the days stretched longer. The forest, vast and indifferent, seemed to close its grip tighter. At first, the media attention gave the family a strange kind of strength. News stations covered the story, neighbors rallied to support them, and strangers across the country sent prayers and letters. It felt, for a fleeting moment, like the world was searching with them. But as days turned into weeks, the tone shifted. Questions started to creep in. Why had such a young child been on that trail at all? Who was watching him when he disappeared? And why were there so few concrete answers? That shift created cracks within the support system. Some church members who had been on the hike avoided speaking about it. Others tried to defend themselves, but stumbled under the weight of guilt and suspicion. The Atadero family, meanwhile, found themselves caught between gratitude for the help they'd received and frustration that no one could explain how their boy was gone. The deeper the crisis stretched, the more fragile things became. Nights for Alan were the hardest. He'd close his eyes and hear Jared's voice, feel the small weight of his son's hand in his own. Then he'd wake to an empty room, a reminder that the nightmare was real. His words to reporters grew sharper, his anger more visible. He lashed out at those he felt had failed his boy, at systems that seemed to crumble under the weight of responsibility. And then there were the chilling details, the kind that stuck in people's minds and refused to let go. Tiny shoes found years later, sitting neatly as if placed. Clothing discovered, oddly intact, far from where the group had last seen him. These finds gave no peace, only more questions. Why were they arranged that way? Why had it taken so long to find them? Each clue carried a sense of unease, as though someone, or something, was playing a cruel trick on those left behind. The breakdowns came quietly at first. The exhaustion, the unanswered questions, the gnawing guilt. It ate at people from the inside. Friendships strained, faith was tested, and trust was fractured. The Atadero family faced advice from every angle. Hold on to hope, let go and grieve, trust the authorities, demand more answers. None of it helped. The truth remained out of reach, and the weight of that void pressed harder with every passing season. The crisis didn't just deepen, it transformed. What began as a desperate search became a long, agonizing endurance, a cycle of fleeting highs crushed by devastating lows. And with each year that passed without resolution, the line between tragedy and mystery blurred, leaving behind a haunting that no one could shake. The final days before Jared vanished were ordinary in every sense, and maybe that's what makes what followed so disturbing. There were no warning signs, no eerie premonitions, nothing that suggested the Atadero family was about to walk into tragedy. Jared was just a little boy living a simple life, playing with his twin sister, giggling at silly jokes, clinging to his dad's hand when he wanted comfort. Those final moments of normalcy, in hindsight, take on a haunting glow. On the morning of October 2nd, Alan Atadero kissed his kids goodbye with trust in his heart. The group had promised a safe outing, a visit to the fish hatchery, nothing dangerous. Alan went about his day, believing his children were in good hands. Meanwhile, Jared was buzzing with energy, thrilled to be outside. Witnesses recalled how he ran ahead of the group, his little body darting between trees, always curious, always fearless. Nobody expected the trail to swallow him. The day itself unfolded like a story that couldn't decide what kind of ending it wanted. At first, everything was cheerful, children laughing, adults chatting, sunlight cutting through the forest canopy. But soon, unease set in. The trail grew narrower, steeper. The adults realized they had taken the kids somewhere more dangerous than they had planned. Still, no one could have predicted the suddenness of what happened next. One moment, Jared's voice carried through the trees. The next, silence. The adults searched frantically, running up and down the path, shouting his name until their voices cracked. Some claimed they had heard him just seconds before. Others admitted they weren't sure when the sound of his footsteps faded. In the chaos, details blurred, and panic replaced clarity. The realization hit hard. Jared was gone. Not just hiding behind a tree, not just lagging behind. He was gone. The adults made the decision to call for help, and soon the entire forest was alive with the sound of helicopters, dogs, and rescuers shouting his name. The atmosphere shifted from the innocent joy of a hike to the suffocating terror of a crisis. The aftermath of that moment stretched into days. Search teams combed the area, line after line of volunteers sweeping through brush and ravines. Authorities pushed deeper into the wilderness, their flashlights piercing the night. Every snapped twig, every rustle of leaves was enough to make hearts race. But still, no Jared. In the following years, the final chapter of his disappearance took an even stranger turn. In 2003, hikers stumbled upon pieces of clothing, his pants, his shoes, oddly intact, placed as though someone had left them deliberately. Not far from the clothing, small human remains were found, later confirmed to be Jared's. After nearly 4 years of not knowing, this discovery should have brought closure. Instead, it deepened the mystery. Why were his clothes in such a strange condition? Why were his shoes so clean, as if untouched by the rough terrain? Why did it take so long for anyone to find them in an area that had already been searched? The answers never came. What should have been the end only opened new questions. For Alan, those discoveries were unbearable. He had spent years clinging to hope, imagining that one day his son might come home. Now, that hope was gone, replaced by an unsolvable puzzle. The final days, the day of the hike, the discovery of his remains, none of it added up. The story of Jared's last hours on Earth was fragmented, full of contradictions, and forever unfinished. That day in October, what began as an innocent adventure ended in silence that still echoes in the Colorado mountains. The forest, beautiful and cruel, kept its secrets close, leaving behind a story with no clear ending. The culminating event of Jared's life remains not just a tragedy, but a mystery that continues to haunt everyone who hears it. From the very first hours, the investigation into Jared's disappearance was tangled with confusion. Search teams arrived quickly, but their approach was scattered. Some believed he had simply wandered off and would be found within hours. Others suspected a more serious danger, an animal attack, or even foul play. That split in thinking shaped everything that followed. Authorities tried to cover ground fast. Helicopters scanned from above, volunteers lined up through trees, and dogs followed faint trails. But for every lead, there was a dead end. The forest was unforgiving, full of cliffs, rivers, and dense brush. If a 3-year-old had ventured too far, finding him would be like finding a single leaf in autumn. At first, officials suggested he might have walked off willingly, a theory that angered Alan. He knew his son, knew his limits, and insisted something more serious had happened. That tension between the family and investigators only grew as days dragged on with no answers. Witness statements added little clarity. Some adults claimed they had seen Jared only moments before he vanished. Others admitted they weren't paying close attention. The accounts clashed, and nothing lined up neatly. Evidence was scarce, and every hour made the trail colder. Months turned into years, and the case lost momentum. Then, in 2003, the hikers' discovery of Jared's clothing and remains reignited everything. Forensic experts confirmed it was him, but the condition of the evidence raised new doubts. His clothes appeared strangely intact, his shoes unusually clean, as though untouched by the rugged wilderness. Investigators leaned toward an animal attack, but the details didn't sit right with many. The family pushed for more answers, but the system faltered. Key questions went unanswered, and the mystery only deepened. Was it nature, an accident, or something darker? The official explanations felt thin, leaving the Ataderos to wrestle with uncertainty. In the end, The investigation became less about finding truth and more about highlighting the failures of the search itself. Missing clues, conflicting statements, and the relentless passage of time left Jared's story unresolved. The forest had taken him, and the world seemed powerless to explain how.